Imagine you were pregnant, and you found out the child you were having was disabled. Would you have an abortion?
To me, abortion would be playing God. How dare I decide on who gets to live and who doesn't?
But what if you were 17 and you got pregnant by mistake, and you really didn't want a baby? Shouldn't you have the right to end the pregnancy?
I have the right to choose when exactly I want to be a mother, and if I want to be a mother at all.
What's your opinion? Two very personal views of an age-old ethical dilemma. What are the rights and wrongs of abortion?
My name's Anna, and I believe that anyone who gets pregnant should have the right to an abortion.
I was 17, and I'd been with my boyfriend throughout all of high school. He was my first love.
We were young, and weren't careful enough when it came to having sex. We didn't use condoms as often as we should have, and there were consequences.
I had a pregnancy test, and it was positive. I sat there for a really long time, like, what am I going to do? Then I had to go to school, which was awful. That day was a really terrible day. And I couldn't really tell anybody. I definitely felt really stupid. I had made a giant mistake, and I was being punished in a way. I decided that I needed to have an abortion. I was too young to be a parent at 17. I didn't want to be a parent because I was still a kid.
I believe we have to think about what kind of life a potential child will have. It's not fair to bring a child into the world if it isn't wanted.
Some people talk about the rights of the unborn fetus and that you're ending something before it begins. And I think that idea was sort of one of the hardest things for me to deal with. But if something can't exist outside the body of the mother on its own, you know, how alive is that really?
I was only 6 weeks pregnant. When I had the abortion, it was just a bunch of cells. To me, life doesn't really start until birth, or at least until the fetus is viable and can survive outside the mother's body.
I don't feel bad about it. I don't ever feel guilty. It was just what I needed to do.
I think the rights of the mother trump the rights of the fetus. The decision to have the abortion completely changed my life, just in the way that I was able to live my life in the way that I'd imagined it in my head.
So I was able to go to university. I could learn everything that I wanted to be learning. I worked really, really hard. I was able to come to London where I met all the people I live with now. And eventually, I'd like to go back and do my PhD. I really want to teach.
When I was 17, I was naive, and I made a mistake. But should I be made to pay for that, and have to put off on my dreams and ambitions when I really didn't want to be a mother? I just want other young people to know that they have a choice. There is a genuine choice. You have the right to decide what to do with your body, and what to do with your life. I have the right to choose when exactly I want to be a mother, and if I want to be a mother at all.
I don't regret making that decision. Abortion was a positive thing for me.
Abortion is legal in Britain, but opinions are divided about when and how easily women should have access to the procedure. Here's a different perspective on the debate.
My name is Marie Tyler, and I believe every unborn child has a right to life. When I first found out I was pregnant, we were over the moon. It was really happy and welcome news. A whole mixture of emotions goes through your mind when you first see them on that screen. For me, life begins at conception. Although it is in its simplest form, it does have that potential to be, fully human. I also believe that it has a soul at that point as well. We had the test to find out whether we might be having a child with Down syndrome. We were told that it was high risk. I didn't know anything about Down syndrome at that point. I knew that there was learning disability with it. For me, that would be a wrong thing thing to do, and I just think you must live with that forever. I come from a Christian background, and to me abortion would be playing God, really. You know, how dare I sort of decide on who gets to live and who doesn't. I do believe that life is sacred, that everybody has a right to be here no matter who they are, what they've got or what they haven't got. Our duty was to look after that child, principally to love that child. They were going to be here no matter what. Hannah is a happy little girl. Amongst people that she's familiar with, wants to be the centre of attention. Communication can be a little bit difficult, so I've learnt sign language. We have had another child since. At this particular point in time, I have to say that she's quite jealous of her little brother, but she's coming round actually. It's not been a picnic with Hannah, but not a day would I change. I trust that no matter how difficult the circumstances, that the best will come from that situation, and that child has a right to live. Some women might say it's their right to decide what happens to their own body. I have to say I don't actually believe that. I just feel that life is sacred and you don't have the right to take it. I know at the beginning it might be just that life in its simplest form, but nevertheless it's life. These children have so much to teach us, and I think those differences should be celebrated, not obliterated.
Representatives of different faiths and beliefs were asked how they felt about the issue of abortion.
The Islamic scriptures tell us that the soul is breathed into the fetus 6 weeks after conception, and then it becomes a living creature. It's a servant of God, it's a creature of God, and to abort it is to murder it. You know, this whole concept of unwanted pregnancy is not actually accepted in Islam, that you can say, oh, well, I didn't want this child, it was an accident. Because if you are mature enough to then, to enter into a sexual relationship, then you have to accept the consequences, and pregnancy is one of those. God decided to send that child into this world for whatever reason, a test for the child, a test for the parents, a test for society, and we have to learn to respect and love and cherish everybody around us, no matter what they look like and what their conditions are.
Humanist perspective on this is that an embryo is not a baby, a fetus is not a baby, an egg is not a baby, a sperm is not a baby. A baby is a baby. At the core of the humanist message is that the person carrying the child, the person growing the fetus, is the person whose feelings matter, because that's the person who, when the fetus becomes a baby, if it does, will love it and will have to love it for the rest of its life. A mother who wants a baby and will give a baby a wonderful life will, of her own accord, with no compulsion, grow a fetus into a baby. And a mother who doesn't want a baby and who doesn't feel ready should have no compulsion. Now, there's no such thing as an unnecessary abortion. Any woman who's pregnant by accident, who doesn't want a baby, is having a necessary abortion.
For Catholicism, the key principle is that the unborn child is a child and so deserves protection. So at 6 weeks, a child has arms and legs and a beating heart. So the view of abortion is simply that the child is not protected any less or any more than a child outside the womb. The direct killing of the child, the targeting of the child, is something which is not permitted in Catholicism.
If a fetus is seriously deformed and the parent decided rather than allow this individual to survive and struggle all his or her life, let us abort so that particular individual will get an opportunity to be reborn in a healthier fetus, might as well abort. So this would be understandable. But if somebody says, look, this was unplanned pregnancy, so we wish to terminate it, or perhaps the gender of this fetus is not right for us, let's terminate it, then the Hindu faith will go strongly against, saying that this is not a good reason for aborting or taking life. There will always be issues which are on the borderline, so there is no clear-cut answer. So how do we decide? The Hindu religion says, look, It is nice to fall back on your scriptures, on the teachings of your mentors and your gurus, etc. But in the final instance, it is you as an individual or as a family who must take a decision.
Judaism sees abortion as a very serious matter. It's not murder, and there are circumstances in which it is permitted. But at the same time, Judaism doesn't tell us that we own our bodies and have the right to do with them whatever we wish. The grounds on which abortion is widely omitted is if the pregnancy is damaging to the mother's health or threatens the mother's life. There is more range of opinion when it comes to the emotional health or the spiritual health of the mother. If it's felt that having this particular child would be just too much and a person could not cope, then there will be those who would take a more lenient view of abortion.
So now you've heard two very personal views on this question from Anna and from Marie, and a range of other beliefs as well. So what do you think? What are the rights and wrongs of abortion? What if you were in so much pain that it felt like life wasn't worth living? Should you be helped commit suicide?
When I'm ready, I'd like the help I need to end my life, right here at home.
But helping someone to commit suicide is currently illegal in the UK. And if the law was changed, would it ever be right that somebody would have to administer the final lethal dose?
I didn't go into medicine to bring about somebody's death.
Two personal perspectives from people on different sides of an ongoing debate. Should assisted suicide be legalised?
My name's Paul Lamb, and I believe everyone with sound mind should have the right to assisted suicide. I had a car accident in 1990. I just remember waking up in intensive care, and I was told that I'd lost the use of my legs, and then I was wondering why I couldn't move my arms and my hands, and then I was told I'd lost that, and it was like, was I dreaming it, was I alive? And I don't think there's a harder thing you can be told, really. My injuries caused me total paralysis. I've no use of anything except moving my head, really. Nothing works, and everything has to be done for me. My life before my accident, I was very active with the family, nice holidays, just making the most of life. So it's come as a shock, ending up like this. When I'm ready, I'd like the help I need to end my life, right here at home. Hi, Kayla. Could you bring us a cup of tea up, please? I'm being fed, made drinks, dressed and washed, showered, teeth done, my nose being blown for me, absolutely everything. So 23 years since I had my accident, and that's 23 years from the moment I'm conscious of being in physical pain and mental pain. And all it will do is get worse as I get older. All pain relief does, be it tablets, morphine, whatever, all it does is knocks you out more and more and more. It sedates you, and you're not yourself. You're not yourself at all. And to me, no point. You've lost your quality of life. You're just laying there ready for death. That is a living nightmare. I love life, but when the time comes, it should be for me to decide when I want to end it. I think it's just the most barbaric, cruel thing you could do to another human being. To take away their absolute independence. I would have no qualms about being helped to die right here in this bed with my family and friends around me. I've got 2 children, and they love me enough not to make me suffer unduly. I know that. If I'm going to be in this bed for what could be year after year, just riddled up in pain, sleeping most of the time doped up, I really, really, really need something sorting out to stop that.
Assisted suicide has been legalised in a number of countries, and there's pressure to change the law here in the UK. But not everyone agrees that should happen.
My name is Charlotte, and I believe we should care for people at the end of their lives, not give up on them by letting them commit suicide. I think when people say, this is my ultimate freedom, my right to end my life, they are forgetting that what they're actually asking is for somebody to help them to do that. So it's not just about them. And they're asking their family and their friends to come alongside them in that act as well. That's a big ask. As a doctor, it goes against everything that I do or that I believe. I work as a hospice doctor. I look after patients who have life-threatening illnesses such as cancer.
How are you? Fine, good.
The patient we're going to visit today I've known for 2 years now, and her prognosis is quite uncertain. She lives with the daily threat that she has maybe months to live.
I feel like I might be slipping a bit down now.
Okay. My job is to try and help people feel more hopeful about the sometimes desperate situations that they find themselves in. In my work, I've seen what a big difference palliative medicine can make for patients. Legalising assisted suicide would be the start of a dangerous slippery slope towards wider euthanasia. I would worry that people who find themselves suddenly very dependent might think that death was the only option. Some patients feel very guilty that they have become so dependent on others. They feel ashamed that they need somebody else to help them wash and dress. So people might feel pressured to end their lives. It's not just our actions that matter, it's the effect of those actions on other people as well. What I've seen where I have experienced somebody who's committed suicide is I've seen the fallout on families and friends that causes. It's the people who are left behind that pay the price. I didn't go into medicine to bring about somebody's death. I went into medicine to help patients manage the illness they are facing and to give them hope. And to me, giving them the final injection feels like I've abandoned them. There are other options for people who are experiencing severe suffering that don't involve me killing them. If you allow suicide, then there's no opportunity for future possibilities. I've seen people adapt in the most disastrous of circumstances and overcome extreme suffering sometimes. And that's what's wonderful about human beings, is we do have the hope and the ability to adapt to what life throws at us. So if that person takes their life when they're in that maelstrom of change, then they lose the opportunity to have more life. And my job is about trying to find more life in people, not more death in people.
Representatives of different faiths and beliefs were asked how they felt about the issue of assisted suicide.
Catholic teaching on suicide is paradoxical, because Catholic teaching is that people are better off dead because of the resurrection, because of the glory in the world to come. But at the same time, meaning can always be found in life, and our destiny and our relationship with God and our relationship with others is found in what we do in this life. And so life is always valuable. Suicide is an act of despair, and we shouldn't encourage or facilitate somebody else's suicide.
Judaism regards life as God-given, and we're not allowed to deprive others of their life. In fact, the 16th century classic code of Jewish law says that somebody who shortens even the life of a dying person by removing a pillow from under their head or other acts which may be rough with them, done deliberately, is as if they were shedding blood. On the other hand, Jewish law also teaches that if something's preventing a person from being able to die, then one can remove those obstacles, but one can't actually intervene with a specific purpose of stopping somebody else's life.
Autonomy is an important part of personhood. So if somebody says, I'm an autonomous person, I want this thing, I'm rational, I can describe to you why I want it, then you don't have a right to tell that person that what they want is not legitimate. If somebody is telling us, I'm in huge pain, I want to die, I've seen enough, then for us to turn around to that person and say, I'm sorry, you contravene my moral code on the importance of life, is fundamentally to disregard the person we're talking to. And the idea that somebody else should tell you to take your joy from a situation that they themselves are not living through, I think is patronising and disrespectful.
We have autonomy and we have free will, and that is the basis of our Anglican understanding of our relationship with God. And so things don't stand in the way of that free will. We have the right to do whatever we want to, but that doesn't mean that we should. In terms of my understanding of my Christian faith, it is that when people die, they are welcomed into the embrace of God, whatever is the mode of their death. That's my personal view.
The philosophic vision that I come with, which talks of law of karma, talks of reincarnation, would in a way support the idea of voluntary euthanasia in certain such situations. In the Indic tradition, the Hindu tradition, death is seen as a comma and not as a full stop. So when an individual becomes diseased, old, the individual will get a new life in a new healthy body.
In Islam, euthanasia and assisted suicide are completely forbidden. Just a blanket ban. We are not allowed to play God. The Quran, is very, very powerful in talking about the incredible power and majesty of God, and that He alone decides, and we have absolutely no right to take life. And we believe that life is sacred because it is a gift from God, and He chooses what He gives us. He may give us health, He may give us wealth, He may not, He may give us a long life, He may give us short life, whatever, that's up to Him. He chooses to give and He chooses to take away, and death is what He has written.
If assisted suicide is allowed, becomes legal, where do you draw the line? It's an impossible line to draw. Who does the assistance? Unqualified people or doctors? Doctors who are pledged to look to life, to support life. Sikhism teaches responsibility to wider society. We say this idea of autonomy, I am important, never mind anyone else, I can make decisions and I must have my way. That is wrong, because we are not isolated, we are not an island, we are part of the mainland, that we have a responsibility to wider society. We also have a responsibility to prevent suffering wherever possible.
You've heard two very personal views on this question, from Paul and from Charlotte, and a range of other beliefs as well. So what do you think? Should assisted suicide be legalized? What if you had a child with a terminal illness, and the only way to save him was to have another child, a savior sibling? What would you do?
We wanted to do anything we could to save our son. We've decided to create a savior sibling.
But is this the right reason to have a child?
Children need to be born because they were wanted, not because they're being used as a tool for some other means.
Two personal takes on a difficult question. What do you think? Is it okay to have a child to save another?
My name's Umi, and I believe having a savior sibling is an acceptable thing to do to save another child's life. When Jivan was born, we were expecting a fully healthy baby. We named him Jivan, which meant life. From the moment he was born, he started developing symptoms. He had severe rashes all over his body, and the more he itched, the more it would start to then open and cut, and it would start to bleed. You can imagine a 6-month-old burning all over his body. It's very painful. Jivan was diagnosed with Wiskott-Aldrich. The easiest way to describe that is like as if he's a bubble boy. He wasn't allowed to touch anything. His life expectancy was not past his 10s. We were told that there was only one real cure for him. That was to have a bone marrow transplant from a matching donor that would match 100% the blood type and the tissue typing. We realized quite quickly that there was no real chance of finding a bone marrow match. For an Asian, it was actually 1.25 million. The consultants told us that there is this new technology that they have that you can actually create a sibling donor that would match completely so they could give their bone marrow to the child in need. We wanted to do anything we could to save our son, and we had to do something quite quickly, otherwise his body would start to deteriorate. We've decided to create a safer sibling. Our daughter was born and we named her Jaya, and the meaning behind Jaya is victorious, so we're hoping that she was victorious in saving her brother's life. From the moment she was born, she was very strong, unbelievably strong. As if she knew she had a mission to donate her bone marrow. My husband and I were very happy to have her be put under general anesthetic to go through this procedure because her health was so good. Jaya was 6 months old when she donated bone marrow to Jivan. It was 100% accepted in his body, and so his bone marrow right now is 100% Jaya's. After almost 2 years, he's going to school, he can go to the playground, he can touch what everyone else touches, can do anything that normal children can do. So it seems that he's completely cured. We were planning on having more children after Jivan anyways. We didn't do this to design a child of a specific hair color, eye color. We had to go through this route in order to save our son. Reincarnation is the belief that after you die, you get reborn again and again and again. So she is given to him and she saved his life. I'm sure he has saved hers in a past life. If not, then he will do something for her in the future. So there's always going to be a balance. They both have a different place in our hearts for different reasons. And Jaya will not be treated differently in any way because she came to help her brother. It would be no different than if we just had created a normal child. Jivan is very aware that his sister helped him. She's lovingly given everything that she could to save her brother.
It's very rare for people in the UK to go through the process of creating a saviour sibling. Only 4 were born in 2012, even fewer in other years. But that doesn't make it any less controversial. Here's a different perspective on the issue.
My name's Simon, and I believe we have to see a child as a human being first, not as an object to be used for his or her genetic material. And I think a very important part of our makeup as humans and our psychology is to know that you're loved and valued for who you are. And the problem with a saviour sibling is just by using that title, you're saying that they have a value outside of themselves, that their value is in what they can do, what they were born to do. Children should be wanted as people for who they are. I'm a biochemist working at the University of Portsmouth. I went into science originally because I just think it's really interesting and exciting, and it's great to find out about things that no one else knows about, so there's this element of exploration. The main role that science has had in our society is to make a discovery about the world and apply it in terms of technology. And sometimes people get too carried away with the end of the technology that's being invented and don't think about what happens along the way. The ends don't justify the means. So, although saving a life is obviously a very high cause, one has to consider the harm that might come about in doing that, and make sure you've considered the good and the benefit of that child as much as the good and the benefit of the child who is currently sick and needing the help. There's also the risk that if they weren't able to save their sibling, and the fact is that that's probably quite likely to happen, that they could find themselves in the position that they know they were born as a saviour sibling and yet their sibling still died. A significant level of harm could be done psychologically to the child. Generally, people should be able to make decisions about what happens to them. Now, obviously, the child who's born has absolutely no choice to be part of this process of helping their sibling. I've got two sons, and when my oldest son was 3 weeks old, he had a very significant heart problem, was on intensive care, and the doctor did actually come to us at one point and say, you need to prepare yourself, your son's not going to make it. Thank God he pulled through, and he's absolutely fine. But as a parent in that situation, I was prepared to do absolutely anything that it would take for my son to get better, including if we'd needed a saviour sibling. At that point, I would have very happily gone in for that sort of thing. And all my nice, fine ethical reasoning flew out the window when it was to do with the well-being of my son. Which is why it's very important when decisions are made about what one should or shouldn't do in a situation, it's made by people who have that little bit of distance. Because if you were to allow parents who were in that situation to make up all the rules and the laws, I think a lot more would be permissible. Being in that sort of situation and having those feelings is not a good basis for ethical decision making. Children need to be born because they were wanted, not because they're being used as a tool for some other means.
Representatives of different faiths and beliefs were asked how they felt about the question of saviour siblings.
From a Catholic perspective, it is important that every child is welcome, and every child is welcome unconditionally. And therefore to have a child of a particular kind for the sake of someone else is not fair to that child. The Catholic Church has objections to in vitro fertilisation. It objects to the substituting of technology for reproduction, for procreation through sexual intercourse, and it also objects to the destruction of human embryos. And the in vitro fertilisation has led to the destruction of millions of embryos worldwide. Part of the Catholic objection to assisted reproduction, to IVF, is that it involves quality control. This is seen particularly in saviour siblings, where somebody is chosen just for their characteristics, so they're not valued for themselves, they're valued for their use for other people or for those characteristics they have.
If God has chosen to give you a child with an illness, yes, we do what we can in terms of medicine right now, but to actually design a child to save that child, I find that very, I find it personally morally very difficult to live with. I think you'll probably find that the scholars will debate this and will come up with both arguments. There'll be some scholars saying, yes, absolutely, do whatever you can to save this person. Another group of scholars saying, no, this just morally just seems so ambiguous and wrong. And then at the end of the day, then the decision is left to the individual themselves, the family themselves, that, well, you've got both points of view there. It's up to you now to decide.
From the Anglican perspective, it would be all right to have a child to save another. Our basic understanding and our ideology about this is based on the fact that children, however they are conceived for their own self, that they are viewed as a gift. And therefore to have a child, try to conceive a child who will also or may also be able to save a sibling with a pre-existing condition still is within that framework that the child is wanted for their own sake, whether or not they should be able to save their sibling.
In the Sikh view, it can be allowed, it should be allowed in strictly limited circumstances where it helps preserve life, but the slippery slope argument has to be watched all the time, because you can move into the direction of designer babies. I want a child with blue eyes, I want a child who's tall, whatever. Those things are, choices like that demean life. It is wrong. Every person, whatever their height, weight, looks, should be valued.
Judaism sees God and human beings as partners in doing the best we can for the world. So, if we make bread out of wheat, or a healing drug out of herbs, we aren't playing God. We're part of a partnership in which we thank God for the opportunities we've been given to make things that are better. And this is how Judaism has seen the medical profession and healing as a whole. If things are for a good and a worthwhile purpose, and certainly saving life is preeminent among such purposes, then it's not playing God, it's being responsible before God and with God.
So now you've heard two personal views on this question, from Amy and from Simon, and a range of other beliefs as well. But what do you think? Is it okay to have a child to save another? What if someone you loved was murdered, and the killer confessed? Should they be put to death?
When you murder somebody, I believe that person deserves to die.
But morally, is it right to take another person's life, even if they're guilty of a heinous crime? And what about the risk that innocent people will be executed?
I was innocent, and I came within 3 days of being sent to the electric chair.
What do you think? Two very personal stories that go to the heart of the question, what are the rights and wrongs of the death penalty?
My name is Tom Elliott, and I believe that sometimes the death penalty is the only just punishment there is. My cousin Lynn was 11 months younger than me, so we were very close. From as young as I can remember, we did all kinds of stuff together. We rode bikes and played and went to the beach, just things that kids do. On July 26th of 1983, Lynn was with a friend of hers, and they were going to the beach, and basically she was kidnapped by a man named David Gore. They were driven from the beach to David Gore's mother and father's residence, and that's where the raping and everything took place. And Lynn was murdered. David Gore was captured that evening. There was an eyewitness of him shooting Lynn in the face, so we knew right then and there that he was guilty. It came out that there were 5 other women that were murdered. In all instances, they were kidnapped, raped, tortured before they were killed. And David confessed that he murdered these other 5 women besides Lynn. I mean, rage builds up inside of you, and you want that person to be gone. The death penalty should be reserved for individuals that you are 100% sure are guilty. I don't believe that in today's world, now that we have DNA, that innocent people will be executed. I believe guilty people should be punished according to the severity of their crimes. When you murder somebody, when you rape, when you torture, when you rob somebody of their liberties of life, I believe that person deserves to die. Being in prison is not enough for someone that destroys lives. The day David Gore was executed, I needed to be there for myself, and I needed to be there for my cousin. We were sitting in the front row, and behind this sheet of glass there was David Gore laying on a gurney covered in a white sheet. It was really rather quick. He went to sleep, and within minutes
he was dead. There was a feeling of relief, of peace. It was final. It was over. I don't think anybody is happy that someone loses their life, but I felt it was justified. I think of Lynn every day and wonder what would have happened had David Gore not killed her that day. I wonder what she would have done with her life. Since the execution, there's no longer the bitterness about what happened to her. All of us have been able to close this chapter of our lives. It's a chapter that will be in the book of our lives for the rest of our lives. But this chapter is closed, and you're able to move on, and you're able to think of Lynn and smile now. You know, we've accepted the fact that she's gone, and the person responsible for her death has been punished completely.
The death penalty was abolished in the UK in 1965, though the issue remains very current elsewhere in the world. Here's another perspective from the United States.
My name is Jody Ambrosio. I believe that the death penalty is wrong, because however careful you are, mistakes will be made. I was arrested for a crime I could not and did not commit, and was charged with aggravated murder, and they found me guilty. I was never even charged with a crime before in my life. My trial is the shortest death penalty trial in the state of Ohio. It lasted 2 3/4 days, from let's start to you die. It was like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. It's like, this can't be happening. This can't be real. And then it's like, I'm really here. And I'm really sentenced to death. I was on death row for 22 years. 23 hours a day, you're in your cell. Time just drags. The way I passed the time was learning the law. And it consumed me. I just worked on my case day in and day out. It took approximately 6 years of the legal process before I was set free. My case is a prime example of the reason why they shouldn't have the death penalty, because I was innocent and they tried to murder me. I came within 3 days of being sent to the electric chair, and electricity would have been sent through my body until I was dead. This can happen to me. This can happen to you, because I was the common Joe. I was never in trouble before. I was doing nothing wrong. The system is broken. It averages out to be, for every 10 that they execute, 1 is set free. That number is unacceptable. I go all over Ohio talking about my case and hopefully open up enough people's minds that they'll put an end to the death penalty. The death penalty should be abolished for numerous reasons. One, it's barbaric. Our justice system is not supposed to be about revenge. These are just facts that were withheld from me. Being in prison for the rest of your life is more of a punishment. All your rights are taken from you. They treat you like an animal. And they have to live with that for the rest of their life. Life in itself is sacred. We should not be the ones that are taking that. God is the only one that has the right to do that. Slowly but surely, the states are turning against it. Every day is a blessing to me. Just to be free, just to sit in silence, because there's no silence in prison. It's constantly noisy. I lost approximately 80% of my adult life because of this. This will haunt me and follow me for the rest of my life, even though I'm free. My ultimate aim is to abolish the death penalty in the United States, but I'm starting here in Ohio, since this is the state that tried to murder me.
Representatives of different faiths and beliefs were asked how they felt about the issue of the death penalty.
Sikh teachings on the death penalty are very straightforward. There shouldn't be one. We should not take life in a brutal way. It brutalizes society.
When somebody has broken the biggest taboo, which is to take somebody else's life, then they have forfeited their right to live. And we don't want people like that in society because they are going to corrupt all of society. But at the same time, if there's any doubt about a person's guilt, then it's better to let that person go free. It's better for many guilty people to go free than for one innocent person to die, is a general Islamic statement. In Islamic law, the heirs of the dead person are given the right to choose what happens to the perpetrator of the evil, and they are told that you have the right to ask for the killer's death, but if you forgive, it's better for you.
This idea of eye for an eye or life for a life, perhaps we need to outgrow that. Maybe in the animal kingdom that's the way things operate, but in the human kingdom, as we become more civilized, the way we address issues like death penalty must continue to evolve and reflect a more civilized society, a civilized world. The idea of taking life for life does not sit well with the philosophy of Hinduism. Even if you kill one innocent person, that means society has cold-bloodedly murdered an innocent individual. This is the frightening scenario. How can you call yourself a civilized society if you ever do that?
The teaching of Pope John Paul II that though capital punishment could be used, it could only be used if a society didn't have any other alternative. And in the modern world, that is simply not the case. If you can, you should also give people the possibility of repentance and of finding a new life. And that's something which, having been punished, should be offered to criminals if it's possible to combine with protection of society. And this will be true even of the worst criminals, because even of the worst criminals, they can be forgiven by God, they can repent.
Even if there is a tiny possibility that an innocent person will be put to death and be put to death by another, that's a risk that's too big to take. And therefore life in prison with no possibility of parole, true life in prison, is the alternative for those who've committed heinous crimes, and that is punishment.
There's a much quoted saying that the rabbis discussed: if a court found somebody guilty and wanted to apply the death penalty once in 7 years, or others say 70, or others say ever at all, that court would be guilty in itself of the shedding of blood. So from that one can see that Jewish thinking moved very much against the death penalty. There's no such thing as closure. Things carry on, they follow us. What's become, through tragic circumstances, part of our reality, it follows us for the rest of our life.
There's no such thing as a violent person against whom violence wasn't wreaked in the past. There just isn't any such thing. There's no such thing as a person who would do such a thing and not be ill. So I think really there's a kind of social burden and a crime serious and brutal enough to warrant the death penalty is really an accusation of the society in which that crime happened, and for society to then turn around and say we can solve that crime by yet more brutality, yet more cruelty, is counterintuitive. I mean, that won't work. Everybody knows that if something happened to one of somebody we love, one of your children, one of my children, I wouldn't just want them to have the death penalty, I'd want to do it myself with my bare hands. But that is why we take the decision away from the victim and away from the victim's family and make the decision collectively. It's because the only way you can maintain civilization is if you move away from the heat of anger and you say, what would I do if I were calm?
So now you've heard two personal views on this question, from Tom and from Joe, and a range of other beliefs as well. What do you think? What are the rights and wrongs of the death penalty? What if you had a serious illness and you depended on medicine just to keep you alive? Would it be okay if that medicine was tested on animals?
If it wasn't for the research that is carried out, and the likes of myself, we wouldn't be able to live.
But do we have the right to inflict pain on other creatures?
I think it's one of the biggest injustices in the world, the way that humans use animals as if they were put here for our purpose.
What's your view? Here are two very different perspectives on this question. Is it ever right to experiment on animals?
My name's James, and I believe testing on animals saves lives. I was first diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at the age of 5 weeks old. When I was a baby, my parents were told that my life expectancy was only 21 years old. It was treatable, but I would have to be medicated for the rest of my life. You start to get mucus on the lungs, you get regular chest infections, and you get tight chest pains. Affects your pancreas, you can have liver disease and also diabetes. Every single drug that I take to treat my cystic fibrosis, by law, has to be tried out on animals first. Medication is a huge part of my life. That's what keeps you alive. My daily routine is 15 tablets in the morning, plus insulin for my diabetes, plus a number of nebulizers and also inhalers. These are all the drugs that I have to take on a daily basis. Insulin, Flixinase, vitamins A, D, E and K, Creon, 10,000 capsules, testing strips, Mylantus and Humalog, ceftazidime, also doxycholic acid. If it wasn't for animal testing, I wouldn't be sat here where I am today, so I have to be thankful for that. If I didn't take all my medicines, then basically things just wouldn't work. My health would deteriorate very fast. I had a couple of friends that I've grown up with cystic fibrosis, sadly. Both passed away at the age of 21 and 22, who I was pretty close to. I'm that age now, but I'm determined to not let that get to me. Obviously, it's always in the back of my mind. When my two friends passed away, I wanted to do something, and I wanted to do something big. I did a sponsored bike ride from Land's to John O'Groats. There was 9 of us in total, and we raised £24,500 for cystic fibrosis. Best achievement of my life. I hope that the money goes to continue testing for a cure. If it wasn't for the research that is carried out on animals, then medication wouldn't be made, and then the likes of myself, we wouldn't be able to live. My biggest hope is we find a cure for cystic fibrosis. Now my life expectancy has gone up to about 45 years old, so I'm happy that things are moving on. At least treatment has improved and life expectancy has got a lot greater.
So some argue animal suffering can be justified if it relieves human suffering, but clearly not everyone agrees. Here's a different view.
My name's Christina, and I believe animal experiments are wrong, both ethically and scientifically. I always was brought up to be kind to animals and to humans by my parents.
When we were younger, everyone was...
When I was 23, I went to Tanzania in Africa and studied baboon behaviour. We studied a troop of 62 monkeys, and getting to see animals in the wild with their own lives made me think about animals in a different light. They have their own lives to lead. They're not here for our purpose. Animals in experiments undergo anything from invasive surgery in their brains, with electrodes put into their brains. They could be given drugs which make them ill. They're given cancers. And they sometimes have tubes put down their throats into their stomach, where the chemical is pumped directly into their stomach. If people carried out those experiments without a licence, they would be prosecuted for animal cruelty. Come on, Lucy. Come on. Hello, Baloo. Now I volunteer at a monkey sanctuary. There are 3 monkeys at the sanctuary who were sent to a major testing lab in Europe where they underwent neurological experiments. Drugs were tested on their brains in the name of science and bettering humanity. I don't believe that the animal suffering is worth it, because if you test a drug on an animal, it doesn't mean it's going to work in a human. We've tested, for example, drugs for cancer on mice, millions and millions of mice, and we still don't have a cure. Cancers in animals and humans are different. Animals can't give their consent like human volunteers can to be part of a trial. The animals have no choice in the matter. And I think it's one of the biggest injustices in the world, the way that humans use animals as if they were put here for our purpose. I like to imagine how the monkeys first felt going from a laboratory environment to what they have now. They must have just felt ecstatic at the change in their lives. Now they get to be outside and just be monkeys. I don't think of humans as a superior species. I think we share this earth with animals, and each individual's life is important. My life is as important to me as a monkey's life is to itself.
Representatives of different faiths and beliefs were asked how they felt about the issue of animal testing.
To what extent are we prepared to experiment on animals? The animals may die, but in the process it may save a lot of human beings. Where do we draw a line? Very difficult. If the animal experimentation are purely for cosmetic reasons, then the Hindu philosophers said nothing doing. Just to get better quality cream, you don't kill animals or don't experiment on animals. Strictly no way. Now suppose you say, by experimenting on this animal, you discovered a medicine which will save a lot of human lives. Don't you think human life is more valuable than animal life? The Hindu philosophy will compromise and say, yes, human life is more valuable than animal life. So it does impose a hierarchy.
For Anglicans, we don't believe that animals and humans are the same. We believe humans uniquely are created in the image and likeness of God. The advances that have been made in drugs makes it justifiable that we test things on animals, but that we must never do that in a situation where animals are being harmed or treated cruelly or without the greatest respect.
As a follower of the teachings of the Buddha, all lives should be respected. That includes animal lives, including insects, because we all have the same fundamental feeling, sensation or feeling, wanting to avoid any form of pain and wanting to experience, the joy or happiness. Desire to avoid suffering is universal. According to Buddhism, all lives have that desire, and we all have that right. So therefore, scientists, who are in that field, now really need to think, are there other options?
If someone's life can be made immeasurably better by testing on animals, then we should consider it. Any harm to animals for cosmetic reasons is totally wrong. But to save life, it can be done.
A humanist perspective is speciesist. We do privilege humans above other species. You have to accept when you step out of the front door that your life is more important than a worm's or than a fly's, and that your neighbour's life is more important than your dog's life. You just have to accept that. Yet, there is, in humanism, a real primacy of empathy, and we do feel that for animals, just as we feel it for humans. I would hope in the long term that vivisection becomes unnecessary, that the species differences between, say, a ferret and a human are actually greater than the the differences in accounting between a computer model and a human. And I think that day is coming pretty soon, to be honest. Computer modelling is very accurate on a number of things, and ferrets are not very accurate.
In Islam, we believe that human beings have been created especially by God and are of a higher nature than animals. That should not make us arrogant, but we are of a higher nature. So human beings are permitted to use the world around them to better their own lives. And if that includes testing medication on animals, that is perfectly acceptable.
So you've heard two personal views on this question, from James and from Christina, and a range of other beliefs as well. Now what do you think? Is it ever right to experiment on animals? On September 11th, 2001, the USA was attacked by terrorists. 4 planes were hijacked, and 2 of them flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. Nearly 3,000 people were killed. How should the United States have responded?
You cannot let somebody come to your country and attack you on that level and do nothing.
But doesn't violence just lead to more violence?
There are other better, more effective, non-violent ways to respond to conflict. We also have to work for peace in this world.
What's your opinion? What situations, if any, justify taking military action? Here are 2 personal perspectives on the question of when is it right to go to war?
My name's Patrick Nelson, and I believe sometimes going to war is necessary for the greater good. When September 11th happened, I was 18 years old. All day we just watched on the television as events unfolded. And to see those images, that's just something that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. I remember thinking in my head, we're under attack, and there's people dying right now, and here I am going to college and I can't do anything about it. And so 2 days after the attacks, I dropped out of college to join the Army full-time. To me, it was a no-brainer that something needed to be done. You cannot let somebody come to your country and attack you on that level and do nothing. And I believe the reaction that we had by going into Afghanistan was necessary. The ultimate aim of attacking Afghanistan was to get the Taliban out of power, while at the same time to decimate the Al-Qaeda network that Osama bin Laden had set up in the country. I believe war is justified when somebody else attacks you, and you need to be able to respond to that. I do not believe that innocents being killed or infrastructure destroyed is a reason not to go to war. You never want to kill innocents. But if you look at every war from the past, there's always been collateral damage like that. War's chaotic. I spent 27 months in Afghanistan. The ultimate aim of war is to have peace. It is a contradiction. And war is very violent. It's not peaceful. But at the same time, it might be necessary in order to have peace. The sacrifice of the military, unfortunately, is necessary. I ended up being wounded by a rocket. 2 soldiers were killed and 8 of us were wounded. The 2 that were killed were standing right next to me. And when I got out, I ended up having 2 different surgeries on my shoulder. I got prescribed painkillers for almost 5 years just to help me try to numb the pain. On September 11th, they deliberately attacked innocent civilians. They didn't even try to attack military bases. If somebody deliberately attacks you, and you know exactly who it is, diplomacy's not going to work already because it must have failed. There's a lot of naive people out there who think that diplomacy's going to work all the time. I mean, in my heart, I wish it did. I wish we didn't have to go and fire bullets at people and to take their lives. But at the same time, there are certain people that you just cannot negotiate with.
Debates about the rights and wrongs of war have been going on for centuries. Here's another perspective.
My name's Terry, and I believe war is never the solution to a crisis or conflict. On the morning of September 11th, by the time we turned on the television, the second plane had hit the South Tower. And at that point, it was just clear that something really awful had happened. A friend called me to say that she was really afraid that my younger sister had been working that day at the World Trade Center. Knowing that she'd been on the 106th floor, there was no hope that she had survived. My world began to fall apart. I mean, it was incomprehensible. I was just profoundly sad that I would never see her again. There were people throughout America who felt that revenge was necessary, and that scared me a great deal. The last thing I wanted was war. Of course, I felt anger, but I didn't want to do anything violent with that anger. We had experienced a horrific crime, but the response to crime is to find the criminals, arrest them, and then bring them to justice. The start of the bombing in Afghanistan was like getting punched in the stomach. I could feel from thousands of miles away that there were people who were going to wake up the next morning and be suffering grief like mine. My issue was we weren't going to war with the people who had attacked us. We had not been attacked by a nation. And it was potentially making people hate America. And it was people hating America who had produced the problem to begin with. A number of 9/11 family members came together and created an organization called September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. I wanted to use my voice to oppose war and to oppose violence. There are other better, more effective, nonviolent ways to respond to conflict. The only way to end war is through diplomacy, by talking with our enemies. Why don't we use the same means to avoid war in the first place? We have places like the United Nations where we can sit and talk and resolve our differences. Going to the memorial, seeing Laura's name in the middle of so many names reminds me of why I think the search for peace and the opposition to war is important. We recall the enormity of the attack, the horror of the attack. Those who say that ending war is naive are taking a very short-term view, because one war leaves behind its victims, and their suffering festers, and it leads to new instances of violence. Now, with the war in Afghanistan being the longest war in American history, I find that people are actually saying, maybe it wasn't the right thing. I continue to hope that we find ways to think about how to respond to that attack. We can't pretend that violence will end terrorism. We also have to work for peace in this world.
Representatives of different faiths and beliefs were asked how they felt about the issue of war.
Generally what we say is, let's strive for peace first, but sometimes there are tyrants out there. If a people are being oppressed, if they're being persecuted, if they're being starved by either their leader or by outside forces, then it is the duty of those people to rise up themselves, and God asks other people around them to help them as well, to fight against their oppressors, because God wants people to live in peace and safety in their own countries.
The teaching of Jesus is that you should turn the other cheek, and that we turn to violence too easily. But also there is a place for violence on behalf of the community if it's used in a restricted way in order to protect people from the violence of others. Our tendency is to be too violent, and it's useful to remind people not to react, because people tend to overreact, and there tends to be a cycle of violence.
The Jewish approach to the concept of war needs to begin with the importance of peace. The prayer for peace is the ultimate prayer of every single Jewish service, and we're taught to seek peace and to pursue it. Having said that, Judaism does not regard all war as invariably and always wrong. Particularly, that refers to wars of necessary self-defense, when there is clearly recognizable evidence of the intent to attack and destroy, particularly directed against civilians, against non-combatants, then one can argue that action taken against them is effectively self-defense and necessary. We don't have the right to exact vengeance, and vengeance in quotes belongs to God. In other words, it is a terrible motivator and dangerous motivator of human actions.
I think terrorism becomes just an issue of plain legality. I mean, if you murder an innocent person, you're a murderer, and you should be tried as a murderer. If there is a political basis for your views, then you need to be engaged with politically. People with a grievance against the government will keep coming back to fight that government. You can quash them, and you can suppress them, and you can attack them, and you can kill them. But if they have a point, then they will keep coming back.
Hinduism recognizes that society sometimes can only resolve its differences through violence. It's a sad thing to admit. Sometimes it is inevitable, if I can use the word. At the same time, you see the same religion promoting the idea of resisting injustice in a non-violent manner. This is, if you like, the example of Gandhi. As humanity has evolved, it's become more civilized, you can resolve human conflict in a humane manner without resorting to violence. So this is the evolving face of Hinduism.
Is war just and is war justified is something that all Christian churches have been discussing for quite some time. And what we have at the moment is a reliance on the just war argument, that a war is waged by a legitimate authority, that it has a potential for success, that the immediate goal is peace, that it's proportional, and that non-combatants may not be killed or killed as little as possible. The issue about whether or not to go to war then would depend on, for those who would follow the just war argument, depend on all those factors coming into play.
If you ask me any circumstances that war could be justified, my answer is no. Because as human beings, we have this great intelligence, and we have great tools to communicate. No matter how difficult, no matter how problematic the other side, there's no justification under any circumstances going to war.
You've now heard two very personal views on this question, from Patrick and from Terry, and a range of other beliefs as well. So what do you think? When is it right to go to war?